Earlier today, Dana White announced the entire lineup for the main card of UFC 304 taking place in Manchester, England. If you follow me on Instagram, I already gave out my early picks for every single one of those fights. We're going to go over and talk about every single one of the fight in a little bit of more depth and take a look at some of the fans' reactions. Starting off, first fight is the main event. We're talking about Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad. Now, it's not the greatest main event to have, especially if you're looking at a time in England when it's going to be like 6 a.m. in the morning. So all the fans in England are going to be in the stadium at 6 a.m. and they're going to have to watch Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad, which could end up being one of the most boring title fights of the year. If you look at some of these comments, it kind of tells that everyone's on the same page. This will not be a fight for the ages. Jesus, one of the less exciting championship fights that I can remember of. Now, honestly, I agree. I agree. This is going to be one of the more boring title fights because neither guy has big finishing power. Neither guy takes a lot of risk. They're both very calculated. And based on Leon Edwards' last title fight, that was one of the most boring ones of the year. And it was the last fight of the year. Very disappointing. I was there in attendance, and I was like, I had a big bet on Leon Edwards, so I was happy that he won. But I was like, come on, man. You're the champion of the world. You're taking on a guy that hasn't fought in like over 2 years in Colby Covington. Like, finish this dude. You're so much better than him. Couldn't get him out of there. And ultimately just cruised to a decision victory. And then, of course, on the other side, we get Belal Muhammad. Remember the decision. Now, Belal Muhammad is on quite the tear. And this is technically a rematch because they fought before, and Leon Edwards eye gouged the shit out of him. So going into this one, we have it was really just one round to judge based off the first fight, and everybody's going to talk about how Leon Edwards was beating the shit out of him, and he kind of was, but you have to take into account that Belal Muhammad took that fight on 3 weeks' notice. Leon was supposed to fight Khamzat Chimaev. Chimaev pulls out. Belal Muhammad steps in, and Leon Edwards was sort of putting it on him in the first round and landed a nice head kick, landed a good 1-2 down the pipe, and Belal Muhammad didn't really look too comfortable. And then we come out round two, and within like 5 seconds, the eye poke just almost took his eye out at that point. Like, Belal Muhammad was on the ground screaming, crying, and it was a bad way to end that fight. But since then, I think Belal's won like 5 fights in a row. One of them was by stoppage to Sean Brady. And Leon, of course, became the champion, beat Kamaru Usman twice, and just beat Colby Covington. So I really want to give Belal Muhammad a good chance to win this fight. And I actually don't think that this fight is super wide. If we look at the betting odds here, Leon Edwards sitting up at minus 215 against over Belal Muhammad at plus 185. And I see why, because Leon might be the more dangerous fighter. He's the current champ. He's fighting in his home country. Belal Muhammad doesn't really have a lot of finishing capabilities. And based on the damage-based scoring system that we've seen, it does seem to be that Belal Muhammad would be at a disadvantage if he's going to try to grapple him. And Leon Edwards just beat Kamaru Usman twice, who's one of the best wrestlers at 170. So Belal Muhammad, if you look at this as a matchup-wise, I think he needs to wrestle to win this. I don't know if he's going to have a lot of success doing that. The only thing I could really say is Leon Edwards does have great double leg takedown defense. Belal Muhammad needs to work on some single legs. If you look at the way that Leon Edwards has been taken down in his last 2 fights at least, it's mostly single legs. They're picking up the leg, sweeping it out from under him. He lands up on his back, and usually he's able to get up fairly quickly. Belal Muhammad gonna need to utilize the single leg takedown, and in this one, I don't know that it's gonna be enough. On the feet, if you look at Belal Muhammad, historically, doesn't really do well with southpaws. Got battered by Jeff Neal. I watched that fight earlier today. He got battered by Jeff Neal. And then, of course, the other southpaw striker that he took on was Leon. Leon whooped him in the first. And then you could say he did well against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who's also a southpaw striker. But Stephen Thompson doesn't really have great takedown defense, and that's what Belal Muhammad did to him the entire fight. So there is a path to victory for Belal Muhammad, but ultimately, I got to go with Leon Edwards at this point. Like, I really can't justify picking Belal Muhammad at this point. Maybe that changes down the road, but these are early picks. I'm usually, when I put out these early picks, I'm thinking, like, who do I think is going to win the fight? Betting odds aside, because before I made this post, before those betting odds even came out, and I might be a damn good lines maker because I picked all the favorites before they even came out. So everybody that picked the win out of those 5 fights turned out to be the favorite, whether it was a big favorite or a slight favorite. So I'm kind of seeing what the books are seeing at this point. So I'm picking Leon Edwards at this point, but I wouldn't be shocked if Belal Muhammad goes out there and is able to pull off something crazy. Moving on, we got the co-main event, Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes. It's just ridiculous at this point that Tom Aspinall has to defend his interim title belt. Like, what are we doing? Like, the treatment that Jon Jones has been given at this point is a little insane. Like, I understand if you get injured and you want to hold on to the title, but nobody does that anymore. Look at the lower weight class. When Yuri Prochazka got his injury, gave up the belt. When Jamal Hill got his injury, gave up the belt. Jon Jones, you were supposed to fight last November. You got injured. Why not give up the belt? Especially when there's Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich up there fighting for the interim belt. You could have just made that an undisputed belt if you knew you weren't going to fight either of them. If you already knew you were going to fight Stipe, and Stipe's not fighting in that interim title belt, why wouldn't you just make that an undisputed belt? So dumb. But either way, Tom Aspinall's going to defend a belt here. I wonder if he's even getting like pay-per-view. I hope so. I hope he's getting some pay-per-view points. But Curtis Blaydes finally getting his chance at not a true heavyweight gold, but he's getting the interim chance. So how is this even going to work? Like, if Curtis Blaydes beats him, I guess he's the interim champ. So, okay, so you beat the interim champ, and now you're the interim champ. If Tom Aspinall wins, do they go, and still the interim champion of the world? It's so dumb. It's so dumb. But Aspinall, I think he's an absolute stud. I think he's the best heavyweight on the planet at right now. Everyone's calling for Jon Jones to fight Tom Aspinall. I think Tom Aspinall beats Jon Jones. The only real question I would have is how he looks after a round, because he finishes everybody in a round, pretty much, other than like Andrei Arlovski finished him in the second round within like the first couple minutes. On the Curtis Blaydes side, man, Curtis Blaydes has been one of the most overrated fighters, I would say. He's on my list. I'm going to be coming out with a most overrated fighters in the UFC list fairly soon. I was going to do that tonight, but this just came out, so this is going to take priority. Curtis Blaydes, I think, is one of the most overrated dudes. Every time he gets a step up, or at least a step where he could be fighting for a title, he loses. He loses to Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis then gets an interim title fight against Cyril Gane. He fights Sergey Pavlovich. He gets smoked. And Sergey Pavlovich got the interim title fight after that. So you look at his wins, like, who is he beating? Like a Chris Daukaus, a Jailton Almeida? Like, even the Almeida fight, he was getting ragdolled for the first round. And then Almeida shoots a shitty takedown, and then he just wins by elbowing him in the head. Like, it's not even like he did anything impressive. You know, like, I just really have never been a Curtis Blaydes guy, and I was on Tom Aspinall big in that first fight, and then he blew his knee out. So this is another rematch that I guess we're seeing. And I see why Tom Aspinall is minus 220. I think he's better everywhere. If you look at how Curtis Blaydes loses, it's to guys with heavy hands. Tom Aspinall's got heavy hands. Like, he's knocking out pretty much everybody. And I would assume Curtis Blaydes really is not going to have much for him on the feet. Tom Aspinall's a great boxer. He should be able to put him away early. But if he doesn't, that's where Curtis Blaydes could shine. And we're not really talking betting at this point. I want to throw the odds on there just because they're out, and I think it's intriguing. But Tom Aspinall's the pick at this point. Like, he's just better. He's better on the feet. I don't see this fight hitting the ground, and Tom Aspinall can hold his own on the ground. He's really solid on the ground. Great jiu-jitsu, good takedowns offensively as well. I don't see Curtis Blaydes going in there and really wrestling him up. I just don't. Tom Aspinall is definitely the pick at this point. Moving on, Paddy Pimblett versus Bobby Green. Now, this is one where initially I'm like, I think Paddy should win. Paddy's younger. He's on a little bit better of a trajectory. And Bobby really isn't super impressive like when you look at his wins. Tony Ferguson, Jim Miller, both older guys. When he's fighting guys that are younger and kind of more in their prime, a Drew Dober, an Islam Mokaev, a Rafael Fiziev, he's losing. Now, if you look at the one fight that's kind of out there is like the Grant Dawson fight, I kind of want to say it's a fluke, man, because how do you knock a dude out with a jab? You know, you knocked Grant Dawson out with a jab. So can I really expect him to do that here? No. Bobby Green's not super heavy-handed. But when I look at this fight, I think Paddy Pimblett's stand-up is a little bit sloppy. And Bobby's a guy that he's just going to put a ton of volume on you. He's going to make you miss, and he's going to make you pay. And I think on the feet, Paddy's going to be swinging these wild hooks or being really aggressive because Paddy's offense on the feet is just pure aggression, really. He's just going in there trying to throw something to hurt you and then maybe look for a takedown. Bobby's got some pretty solid wrestling. I don't think he's, going to get out grappled really badly in this spot. And I think on the feet, he'll make him miss and he'll make him pay. So I went with Bobby Green as a pick here. And I was kind of thinking Paddy Pimblett might be a favorite. But I thought Bobby was just the pick at this point. And then I looked at the betting odds when they came out. Bobby Green's a favorite. And he's not even really a slight favorite. He's minus 175. I think that equates to a little bit over a 60% win rate. So Bobby Green as a favorite is kind of interesting. And as a bettor, I'm kind of tempted to take Paddy as an underdog. So, the pick right now is Bobby Green. But Paddy Pimblett as an underdog fighting in England, being the younger fighter, having some grappling upside. And he doesn't have like pillow fists. He knocked down Tony. He's got a KO in his UFC debut. So I think he's dangerous. Bobby does seem a little bit chinny at this age. Like he doesn't take a shot as well. And he loves to, shoulder roll and get a little bit cocky. I think he could get caught. But for now, Bobby Green is the pick. Moving along, we don't have a graphic for that. So we'll just move along with the betting odds here. Manel Kape versus Muhammad Mokaev. When I think about this fight, I've never been impressed with Muhammad Mokaev. And I could see why he's the underdog here. And just as a spoiler, I took Manel Kape for a pick. If you follow me on IG, you already know that. But I think Manel Kape on the feet pieces the hell out of Muhammad Mokaev. And then if you look at Mokaev's fights, who is he beating? Like he's narrowly beating these guys that he should theoretically be mollywopping. Like a Jafel Filio or a Malcolm Gordon. He went to the third round with Malcolm Gordon. How can I really be excited about that? And then he nearly gets his knee shredded off by Jafel Filio. And then he goes and fights Tim Elliott, and he's down 2-0 going into the third round. If Tim Elliott survives, Muhammad Mokaev's O is no longer there. So I don't like, number one, that he's a slow starter. Number two, that he's kind of fighting down to the level of competition because this guy's supposed to be an insane prospect, a guy that's literally never lost, amateur or pro. You should be running through these guys. He's just not. I know Tim Elliott's a veteran. It's a tough fight for some of these younger guys. He's a good wrestler, but you're down 2-0, and I don't think Tim Elliott knew that for one. So I think he's kind of going in there thinking he might need a finish or at least need to win the third round. If he just fights that conservatively, Tim Elliott wins that fight. And then his last fight against Alex Perez, not impressive whatsoever. Alex Perez was a guy that hadn't won a fight in like 4 years. I think his last fight was his last win was like 2020 or something like that. And he Didn't get takedowns. His stand-up looked a little bit more improved, but Alex Perez is a guy that is usually fairly hittable on the feet. He can take some damage. It just didn't look good. He was just dropping down to his knees, sniffing crotch. Like, if they don't have the knee to a down opponent rule, like Mokaev getting his head kneed off into the third row. I think Manel Kape at this point, he's so experienced in the striking, and I would assume his grappling is fairly solid. I know he trains with the Bashaw brothers in Las Vegas at Extreme Couture. I think he should be able to handle the wrestling of Mokaev as long as he doesn't give his back in these situations or just find himself on the cage for 2 or 3 minutes at a time. I think in the stand-up, he can work the guy. He's going to be so much better in the stand-up. His timing is so good. I got to go with Manel Kape, and he is the slight favorite, which I was kind of shocked to see because Mokaev being undefeated, this young killer, I thought he might be the favorite, but Manel Kape is, a slight favorite, so it makes sense. And once again, I picked the favorite before it was even out. Last fight to talk about, Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze. Arnold Allen is the minus 220 favorite here. I think this is a great fight for Arnold Allen. If you look at his last 2 losses, he's on a 2-fight losing streak, but it's Movsar Evloev. It's Max Holloway. And what he did to Dan Hooker in London, I think it was, so it was in England. He destroyed him. And Giga at this point, I think he's like 36 or 37. There's the official pick for you there on the IG. At this point, I don't think Giga doesn't have much of a future. He's 37. His last fight against Alex Caceres really was not impressive. Like, Alex Caceres is a tough out, and he won by decision. I thought, it was fairly close, but I didn't think it was anything crazy. Like, he didn't go out there and outclass him. Alex Caceres is a guy that's right around number 15 in the featherweight division. He's not dangerous on the feet. He has good grappling, but he never uses it. And it was just a kickboxing match between Giga and Alex Caceres. Giga's going to win that all day. Giga's a guy, of course, we know wants to stand and strike with you. Arnold Allen was having great moments on the feet against Max Holloway. He wasn't outclassed by any means. You look at Max Holloway versus Gaethje, and then you look at Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen. It's night and day. Arnold Allen stood in there and delivered a good performance against Max Holloway. He lost, but it was a good performance. And then last time out against Movsar, he was giving Movsar everything he could handle. Like, I know Movsar won that fight and won it somewhat clearly. I know a lot of people think Arnold Allen may have even won that fight. I don't think so, but he looked good, and I think this is a great spot for Arnold Allen to get a win and get back into title contention, I would say. He's taking a step down. Giga, I believe, is like 9 or 10 in the featherweight division. Standing, I think Arnold Allen can match or even land some better shots than Giga, and of course Arnold can mix in the grappling because Giga wants to keep the fight on the feet. I think this is Arnold Allen all day. You see minus 220, and it kind of reads the story there. And it makes sense to me, man. He's younger, better trajectory, just a better future, fighting in his home country. It makes sense. Give me Arnold Allen. And, those are the breakdown for UFC 304. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I will be back here with more content. Hey Job Picks here on the YouTube. You can follow me on IG for more updates like this. Usually post there definitely every single day. Probably once or twice, maybe even 3 times. So follow me there. Appreciate y'all. Till next time, Job Picks, we out.